A ballerina's perspective, from performing with New York City Ballet and Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater to publishing poetry books and mentoring kids and teens. Join us in a weekly discussion with experts to gain mental health clarity and achieve growth and moral consciousness. Give our show a 5 stars, comment, share, and come along for the ride.
Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast. Today we have Ella Parlor, a marketing powerhouse whose campaigns have yielded over $1 billion in sales globally. She's a founding partner of EP Consulting, podcaster, speaker, real estate investor, and the author of the best-selling book, Untitled. Ella's SCF philosophy encourages philosophy encourages and empowers leaders to find success across multiple dimensions in life: spiritual, emotional, financial, and physical. She dives into the nuances of building success in her podcast, Eavesdrop with Ella. Such a wonderful story and success you have, and it's so beautiful and kind of synchronistic because this month I've been talking to a lot of clients, and especially like feminines who are women who are in this world of like success and leadership. And I think it's so beautiful how you reached out to want to join the podcast, and it's like such a nice alignment. How did you get involved in the whole entrepreneurship world? Because I know some people kind of fall upon it, or some people work really, really hard to kind of achieve their levels of success. So how did you kind of like start it?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm very eager to not take credit for the work that I've done. I think that it would be unfair to try to inspire someone to do what I did, be like myself. My hope is by sharing an honest story that it will not offer ideas of this is how you can do it, but more giving like the strategies and mindsets that come with it.
ClickFunnels easily build any type of online business and sales funnel in record time, no matter what your product, service, or niche, without any tech design or experience whatsoever. Try the ClickFunnels 14-day free trial, link in the description of the podcast.
The way that I started my business is I love what you said, falling upon it. That's certainly how I feel. And I'll say that the story of my career, which is how I started in corporate, is so unusual and interesting that it became a best list. I wrote a book called High Tolerance, which outlines that. So ultimately, it is through being when opportunities came my way that I was able to build out the. And what I will say is that I never had the full staircase. I'm only ever seeing that next step. So the staircase is totally blacked out. I don't know what's at the end of it, but I know that I'm going to do what I can to get onto that next step. And it really has been a brick by boring brick built, and it is always being built. I'm nowhere near the top, and I'm nowhere near the top of my game. So, my book kind of outlines that, but I could say, I rolled up my sleeves and I worked really hard and I overcame X, Y, Z, but I think it really comes down to being as prepared as you can be, self in positions where opportunities are opening up to you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing and for writing your book. And it's such an interesting perspective, high tolerance. I feel like so many people are aspiring in a way when they're first kind of entering this entrepreneurial world, when they want to chase that fame and success and status, that they kind of desire that high tolerance. I know it's such an ego thing where when we're growing up and we see groups of people that are achieving and successful, and we also want a part of that. When we actually stumble and fall or go through kind of traumas and experiences in our lives that are kind of forming and shaping and molding us into who we're supposed to be, it's actually we're usually taken aback and we're like, wow, it's it's actually being high tolerant to something. It leads to a kind of numbing experience long term, especially if like we're running away from ourselves and we're running kind of to get something. So I feel like I personally also went through that. I feel like a lot of people have their stories and how they experience that because like whatever the wound is, and everybody has some kind of wound, some kind of inner child trauma, we're kind of tracing that element, even if it's like subconscious and we don't really fully understand why.
Unlock your best life with Soul app. Book a holistic wellness experience with a trained guide and start changing your life today with compassion practices, inner healing, food and diet, and so much more. Tap into a healthier and happier life with the #1 purposeful living app in the US, the Soul app, link in the description of the podcast.
But I know that sometimes in relationships there's that chasing element that we just want to chase until we get it. And if we don't get it, we sometimes chase harder. So I feel like it's interesting how we can kind of look at what we're chasing and why we're chasing it. And if it's not aligning, kind of like pull back, take a step back, and maybe you have to like reassess your kind of priorities and to see like what you should be chasing and why. Did you come to that like realization as well when you're going through writing a book?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and you're touching upon something I was excited to speak with you about, which is self-awareness, controlling your controllables. So the reason why my answer could be frustrating, how did you build a business? How did you build your career? I do, like I say, I outline the dirty details in my book, and give the full-winded answer. But if, in a nutshell, it really is about knowing yourself well enough to know how to perform your best and being open to your blind spots. And I think that self-awareness is so crucial. Empathy is really crucial. There are just so many soft skills that are required, and creating that harmony and balance in a business space could be a little bit more difficult. I wrote High Tolerance from my recovery.
Sanger Daniel's online seminar promoting a positive message of self-healing with bioenergy work together with live seminars and remote coaching. Use code BIO20 for a 20% discount for our audience. Link in the description of the podcast.
In December 2022, I had several surgeries and my entire life came to a sudden halt. And in that stillness, in that loneliness, in that tremendous amount of pain, I started writing High Tolerance. High Tolerance is about creating habits that help you for when the time gets really rough, but also that propel you to a better life, better opportunities, by always, by maintaining a high tolerance. And then also because life is balanced, life is full of contradictions, that there are times where we have to know the limitations of what we will tolerate and not break our back trying to tolerate too much. So a good example would be, studies have shown that by taking a cold shower in the morning, like a frigid cold shower, or doing a cold, right? You've seen those cold plunges on Instagram.
Yeah, it's a good trend.
Everybody says it's a great way to start your day, and that's a tolerance.
Podpitch is the first and only software that finds, writes, and sends pitches to podcast hosts from your actual email address. Podpitch will make sure you get podcast bookings, guaranteed. Link in the description of the podcast.
Exercise. What you are doing is stopping your body to the point that when this happens throughout the day, you are not as affected by them because you've already put yourself in a higher in a state of higher tolerance. So your pain threshold has risen, right?
Yeah.
Now let's take this to an extreme, right? Let's say your baths keep getting colder and colder because you want to make your pain tolerance that much higher, right? What do we know will happen if you make the water too cold? You'll freeze yourself. You'll give yourself hypothermia. You'll make yourself sick. And so while we can honor this concept of cold baths, we know that there is a limitation. And water, which has an exact freezing temperature of 32 degrees, I believe, right? We don't know what that freezing point or boiling point is for us until we start stretching ourselves with different. And so I think that understanding and being self-aware enough to say, I've studied longer than I should have. I need to, get longevity in this. And that's where I did develop my Steph philosophy, is to make sure that we aren't just trying to freeze back for a quick fix, but looking at the whole picture of, okay, where can I take on harder to perform better? And then also, where can I take a step back and reflect on how I'm going to be better and plan on being better? And so I think that constant balance sometimes gets lost when we're talking about business or personal development. And that's why I wanted to write my book, because I think it's a fair blend of, the business mindsets that go into an entrepreneurial spirit, building a career, driving revenue, all of those hard skills that we need, but then also brings in my recovery, my facing my own mortality, being in a hospital where the revenue that I made, the money that I made, the dollars that I was selling, my campaigns, none of that mattered because I'm sitting in a hospital bed staring at my feet, right? And so my book offers a blend of those emotional components that we see from, the softer skills of life, the financial aspects, which are, of course, really important for our life, and then really to focusing on my physical health as well.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. This is reminding me of like the whole spiritual journey, and so many listeners actually go through different spiritual journeys as they experience kind of different moments in their life. But they did have to take a big step back from the physicality of reality. And that's a lot of times when spirituality starts kind of like building up and a new version of themselves is kind of like rebirthed. And it's so interesting because today is actually the last day in the Mayan calendar. So this is like the day of no time. And it's kind of like connecting to that stillness element that so many of us kind of like either we're pushed into stillness because we have to heal or deal with stuff, or it's an opportunity, like you mentioned, the stillness is an opportunity. Either we're pushed into it or we can actively partake in it in moments of finding clarity. And I feel like this is also a beautiful alignment and an opportunity for people who enjoy, making resolutions for like the new year, because tomorrow is the Mayan New Year calendar. So it's like this is a perfect opportunity for like planting those new seeds and those layers that you want to experience. So it's like it's a great way to find fulfillment in yourself by taking those like first steps to realizing what it is you want. So sometimes people are so busy that they don't have time to like think about what they want. And we have to sometimes kind of like use that, force ourselves to take a step back. And even if you don't have time during the week, try to give yourself like, I tell my clients, like 1 or 2 minutes even. It's like those 2 minutes even to just like journal something, or just even in your mind, take that stillness and be like, what are my current dreams? Like, what do I actually want? What's going to make me happy right now that maybe I have never done before, and maybe I haven't told anybody? And I feel like in those moments, in those sacred still moments, a lot of self-reflection is totally done, yes, and the opportunity for growth is such a beautiful place.
I do agree. I think that sometimes in life we have to have some drastic, dramatic, call it a rock bottom, call it a plot twist, whatever we may want to call it. But I would also hope that it doesn't, yes, we can learn a lot of lessons in those moments, but it doesn't require that. We can find ways to incrementally develop every single day without needing that drastic break, pause, loss, you know. I'm a firm believer because of the foundation of spiritual teachings I have, the psychological teachings I know, um, various aspects of, emotional cognition. I do believe and know that in moments of pain, we are often revealed, it is often revealed to us what our purpose is. And what I've learned through the pain throughout my life is my purpose is to show people that they are seen, that they are heard, that they are understood, and that they're not alone. And that's what I've learned through, my pain. I also believe that you can take your pain and turn it into purpose. So you could also find your purpose um, by just taking a step back and doing an inventory of who you want to be and why it is you want to be that. And I think we learn the same lesson over and over again in our lives. And it's not the same lesson for each individual. And so when we find ourselves in those times of solace or those times of silence, it's our duty to say, okay, universe, what is the lesson to be learned here?
Wow, I love that. It's so true. And it's so interesting how lessons shift. And it's like once we learn our lesson, it's like we might not even realize it so loudly. It's just a quiet moment, and when we figure it out, it's like, oh my gosh. It's like the patterns kind of, the puzzle pieces come into place, and it's like, wow, these were my patterns, and these were kind of like moments in time that were maybe teaching me something, but sometimes we don't even realize it until such a long period of growth and the journey of evolution in the soul kind of like figuring out life. That's when it happens. And it's so interesting how in your bio you mentioned this kind of like multi-dimensional thing where you want to align with your physical, financial, emotional, spiritual self. I think that's such a beautiful kind of like message to people, because so many times society is kind of like instilling in us financial, 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 or maybe spiritual people like the spiritual, spiritual, spiritual. But it's like actually there has to be a balance, and it's such a beautiful point. And like for myself personally, before when I was kind of going through like a deep spiritual public awakening, I was really focused on that. Like I didn't care about anything else, I didn't care about like physical that much, emotional. I wasn't even like tuned into my emotions that much. I was just like in this like spiritual world of timeline jumping or learning about different like cosmic things, maybe like astrology. And now it's kind of shifting, and I'm like realizing, oh, like I'm more needing like emotional connection, emotional conversations, compatibility with emotions. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that we shift like that. So it's such a beautiful thing to remind ourselves. And what are you right now feel like doing more of? And where do you feel like you have like happiness? Which kind of like department do you feel like, oh, I feel good in this right now, but I really would like a little bit more of this?
Yes, I definitely agree that I love what you said about the spiritual, 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 forgetting to focus on the finance. I think we can see that sometimes too. So the balance is needed all around. And I don't believe that perfect harmony or perfect balance
Right.
is achievable on this planet.
Right.
The idea is we are always developing so we can get closer to it. But I think we also have to accept that with the waves of life, with energy shifts, with things that change, there are always going to be things out of balance in the momentary, because it's creating balance on a much bigger level than we could even, cosmic, as you said, level than we can even realize. And it's funny that you asked me this question about Seth, because this is the question that I ask all of my podcast guests with Ella. So when I talk about my Seth philosophy, I'll say, where do you feel the strongest? Where do you want to develop more? And the answers are always very interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes I guess correctly, and sometimes I'm way off, because you could be talking to a successful business owner and you would assume that maybe they want to focus more on their relationships or their spirituality, but in fact they feel really strong there and they've completely negated their physical health and they haven't worked out in months. So I always love the answers, and I created this Steph philosophy for myself. I created it so I can do inventories on a daily basis of, okay, Ella, here's what you're doing today. How is it serving you spiritually, emotionally, financially, physically? By creating the Steph philosophy, SEFPH, Steph, spiritual, emotional, financial, physical, it's very easy for me to go through it and remember. Just think Steph, spiritual, emotional, financial, physical. All right, I'm doing this podcast today. How is it serving me spiritually? I get to share my voice. Emotionally, I'm making a new interpersonal connection. Financially, maybe not financially, right? And that's okay. Like, that's okay. You recognize it and go, okay. And then physically, probably not serving me physically. I'm sitting down right now. I'm in a darker room. So understanding that, okay, when I hop off this podcast, how am I going to create balance? I just had this spiritual, emotional connection, but I also want to make sure that I go out and take a walk, go to the gym, move my body, get up, stand up, because I maybe wasn't paying as much attention to my physical health during that podcast. Now, this is on a very minute basis, but if we can get into the habit of thinking in terms of a holistic, comprehensive balance, I think we will become better in all aspects of our life. And what I have found in working with, as you mentioned, I talk about this in my book. I have a whole chapter about being famous and celebrities, and I talk about my experiences with famous people, celebrities, growing up in Southern California, growing up around celebrities. I talk about this. I think where I've been so blessed in my life is that I grew up with very, very wealthy people, some who had a lot of attention on them. And what I promise you, and I know for a fact, is money and fame, it just will not under any circumstance create happiness. And so knowing that some of the wealthiest people in the world are incredibly miserable, I started thinking to myself, okay, I've been working so hard on this career for the past 10 so years, but do I want to pursue financial gain for the next 10, 20 years at the detriment of my relationships, at the detriment of my going to the gym, at the detriment of taking care of my physical self, at the detriment of doing the spiritual practices that are so important to me? Is that something I'm willing to do? And for some people, I would say like the Elon Musks of the world, right? They're just like, I'm going to go. I have to create this thing. I'm going to make a lot of money. This is my purpose. This is where I'm at. But it will be incumbent upon him to create balance in his life on those other fronts, right? And keeping those emotional connections with his children, keeping emotional connections with his romantic partners, his family, right? So I have seen that having tremendous financial success can sometimes amplify your pain, because when you have something that's difficult, a lot of times money can fix it temporarily. But if you find something that money can't fix, like a broken heart, like an addiction, like your child not wanting a relationship with you, that pain is amplified because you can throw as much money as you want and the problem only gets worse. And so I think that sometimes we forget that it is so important that we keep that balance. And that's what I hope to bring to the business world. I love business, as I said. I love marketing, strategy, sales, fractional executive work. I really love all of that so very much. But I also know that it's important that the leaders of our companies, the leaders of our country, also have that balance so they can give their people balance and harmony. And I think that when we're happy at work, when we're spiritually and emotionally fulfilled in our financial pursuits, that's when we are better friends, better bosses, better workers, better mothers, better fathers, better spouses, better children, to our parents. we become better people when we're closer to that purpose. And so that's where I've done that. That was a very long-winded answer. I apologize.
No, love it.
Where I feel the strongest today, like literally today, which is, to be honest, I'm having a bit of a hard, little bit of a hard week. Um, so everything feels out of sorts at the moment for various reasons, but I think ultimately where I feel incredibly strong is on the emotional front. I have a lot of emotional tools in my back pocket because I dealt with a lot of emotional trauma at a younger age, started going to therapy at a younger age, and again, pain becoming purpose, right? At that time in my life, it seemed like there would be no purpose in that pain. And if you try to tell me, oh, this will be purposeful one day, no way.
Yeah, well,
But because of that pain, I started going to therapy that normalized therapy for me. I didn't have the best therapist. It took me a while to find a good therapist, but I've always been on a pursuit of, recognizing my cognitive behavioral patterns, psychoanalyzing the actions and decisions I make, the impact versus the intention of the things that I do, and making sure that I'm just a overall good citizen, but also feel healthy in the head. So even when I'm having a tough season, like I've been having, this week, I feel really equipped with, gratitude and just knowing the things that I have to do to get myself feeling better. Where I'm struggling the most in my life, and part of this is because of the surgeries I mentioned. Um, Nearly 2 years ago, I had these surgeries, spent about a half year, a year recovering. And then this year, I've been just wanting to get my life back. And so I haven't been as diligent about my diet. I haven't been as diligent about working out. I'm on a book tour. I'm traveling. I'm doing these podcasts. I'm sitting a lot. I'm working on installing a standing desk at my fiance's house because I have one at my house. But, there's a lot of transitions in my life right now. And so physically, I'm just not taking care of myself the way that I know I could. And I want to address that and rectify it. And I think a big step is recognizing that. How about you? Where do you feel strongest in the set philosophy, and where do you feel like you might want to develop?
I think because I mentioned a little bit about like the emotional part, I feel like I really like before when I didn't really care about the emotional bonding that much, and I kind of was focusing on like spirituality, and it's like I wanted spiritual clarity. I wanted to understand like you mentioned, the pain, the purpose, all of those kind of elements. I wanted to kind of be aware of like what my purpose is. I wanted to kind of like figure out if my purpose feels good to me. And that kind of took a while where I kind of neglected different friendships, different situations and experiences because I was really focused on me. And maybe it was a little bit of a selfish time, but it's like I have to take that, I have to take accountability in a way to try to figure out what I wanted. And I feel like now I kind of want to build back those emotional connections. And I feel like I have to reach out sometimes to be like, okay, wow, like this is what I need. I'm gonna ask for it. And before I never thought like, oh, like you have to ask for what you want, sometimes it doesn't just happen. Especially if you haven't been continuously striving or continuously in the environment and you want to go into like a new environment or a new path or a new experience, you have to ask for it. And that kind of puts a perspective like, okay, wow, this gives me more empowerment. Even if I feel kind of like weird about it, like I have to ask, it's okay, it's fine. It's like I'll take the first step. And if there's kind of like rejection or it doesn't align, it's fine. Like it's totally fine. And I feel like sometimes people are so afraid of being rejected that they're not going to take that step. But it's like those things are so universal. It's like rejection is just like a wave. Sometimes the wave just comes up, and if you don't have the tools, obviously it's hard. If you're starting to kind of doubt yourself and go through a whole cascade of negative emotions focused on, self-sabotage or thinking you have no self-worth, which a lot of us do. I go through, everybody goes through it, but it's like when you have those tools, it's like, oh, okay, this is a this is not in alignment with my high school. And it's hard sometimes, it's hard oftentimes to be rejected, but it also hopefully it like steers people into a better direction where they're supposed to be. So once I realized that that's how it actually works, I start to see like, wow, like sometimes those friendships or connections don't really lead anywhere. That's okay, you know, like I was accepting. I was accepting. I was like, okay, this does not lead anywhere. I don't want to force it. I don't want to push it. Like, you know, sometimes in relationships, people like push it. It's like, no, it has to work out. It just has to work. So like, I don't really do that because I know the result. It becomes like, you know, chaotic volcano explosion. So I kind of realized that if these emotional bonds and connections don't work out, okay, I'm going to respect it. I'm going to take the steps to try. And if it doesn't align, I'll just take a step back and go, okay, I'll try a different direction. I'll try something else. And so, yes, I'm working on emotional connections and building that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say that when you were talking about neglecting the emotional on the pursuit of spiritual, I do think that line between spiritual and emotional get blended sometimes erroneously. And I think a interesting example would be there was a time in my life where I was a lot more open to sensitivity, meaning that, you know, I'm a highly sensitive person, um, definitely an empath. And the hard part is that sometimes if I'm extra sensitive, it I can't go anywhere without people wanting to share, you know, their hardest feelings, their hardest days, you know, with me. And then I'm, you know, late to work, quite literally, because the barista at Starbucks is telling me about her breakup. Or the ticketing agent at the airport is telling me about how her son was killed in a mistaken identity drive-by shooting. Or a woman is telling me how her son was killed, you know, in a car accident. I I've had a lot of people share with me in very public spaces
Wow.
that I wasn't expecting. Strangers. I'm talking about complete and total strangers share their lives with me, and I talk with them and I hug them and I touch them, and then what happens is I walk away from that conversation with what feels like a very dark, heavy cloud raining over me. I feel like there's a transfer of energy, and it now affecting how I show up to dinner with my friends or to the office at work. And so I started closing off some of my, you know, we'll say spiritual openness because I needed to persevere, to preserve my emotional state.
Wow.
And that's a hard decision because, you know, a lot of times we value empaths and we talk about how important it is to be empathetic and sympathetic. But what we don't talk about is that transfer of energy that can really have an effect on our emotional state. And I had this beautiful dream where I met myself one time, and I see her. It wasn't me. I see her and I'm like, wait, if you're Ella, then who am I? And then I look down at myself and it's my own hands, and she goes, you're you. And it was the only time I'd ever met myself in a dream. And
Oh.
she touched me in the chest kind of hard, kind of like a forceful, you know. And right when she touched me, I just felt that relief when you're wearing a really heavy backpack and you take it off. You know, you don't drop it, like someone comes and takes it off for you. You don't just
Wow.
drop it to the floor, but like someone comes and says, no, let me have this heavy backpack. That's what it felt like from my head to my toes in this dream.
Wow.
And then she looked at me and said, this is what you do when you talk to people. This is what you do when you're listening to their pain. And then she walked away. It was a very quick exchange. And
Unbelievable.
so I explored, you know, what that dream might have meant, what the meaning behind that was, and what I know the takeaway is that it is my job to share my story, attract people who need to hear something that's more like them and not like what we hear everywhere else. Someone who, is able to offer, yes, the empathy and the spiritual side, but then also acknowledge there's a real world out there. And we only have one body. We need to take care of it. And unfortunately, there are, in my opinion, if I can be controversial, some forces that don't want us taking care of our physical bodies and promote very physically unhealthy products and things for us to consume.
Yes.
And we're consuming them all the time. And
Yep.
so it's like, okay, I want to create a space where people who, want it all, we'll say, but are truly looking for that balance, not just the feel-good guru singing bowls, not just that, but actually building a business, creating a legacy for your family, learning how to invest in markets, learning how to invest in your future, learning how to invest in your communities, learning how to invest in your family. These are things that I want to empower people, because I'm not the best at anything. I'm not the best. I'm not going to be the richest in the room. I'm not going to be the prettiest in the room. I'm not going to be the smartest in the room. But what I am is I'm going to be relatable. I'm going to understand. I'm going to meet you where you're at. And so hopefully I believe that because I was created to be, we'll call it mediocre, average, whatever you want to say, across all boards, it's that I'm able to, bring connectivity to different types of communities. I wouldn't want to hang out with a group of people that all look the same all the time. I like to pull, best practices from here, pull best practices from there, and then put them together to create a really full, abundant life for myself, for my clients, for the people who work for me. I don't always do the best at it, but I certainly try.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I think it's actually a testament to your level of soul mastery when people kind of come to you and are feeling your vibes. I feel like they can feel your healing energy, your healing essence. I feel like, yes, we do have to kind of like protect and take kind of those boundaries, to place those boundaries and to have that tolerance and, self care and self respect. But I do think because you are attracting that energy, it's like you have that gift of, compassion and sharing your gift with people. So that's a really beautiful thing. So,
Thank you, thank you. I'm learning to be grateful for it, and as I said, I'm learning to understand that a lot of the opportunities, gifts, and talents I have are not of my own, but all I can do is claim them. So, a big portion of why I've been successful is because I'm from Southern California, which is a really great market to have personal connections. Like growing up there, you can't replicate the connections you're going to get growing up there versus moving there as an adult. And that's not within my control. There's nothing I did to deserve that, but I try to make the most of it. And the fact that I'm a woman, right? Like it's a great season to be a woman, I feel. I genuinely feel that. I feel like we are in the time of female empowerment. Feminism is all the rage, right? Like it's a great time. If you got to pick one, right? If we get a choice, like I would today, right now, I'm proud to be a woman. I'm happy to be a woman. I think it's a great time to be a woman. And that wasn't my choice. I didn't choose this. It's a great time to be a minority, right? Like, so there are things where we can have factors that come into play that can be trendy, that can be convenient, but whatever it is, there are areas of my life where I feel like it is inconvenient, right? My health setbacks, that's not convenient. That is an expensive, by the way, pain. And so understanding I can only control what I can control. I can't control where I grew up. I can't control how I grew up. I can't control my health issues. All I can do is try to mitigate them a bit and take the healthiest steps to make sure that I have enough finances to get the help I need when I need it. And so really looking at our lives, I think from that Seth philosophy lens will really help us figure out that happiness piece that I think a lot of us, whatever we're pursuing, we're still missing that.
That's so lovely. Yeah, it's so true. And speaking a little bit to marketing, I know so many of our listeners are actually talking to me about questions of marketing, and some people are writing new books or creating new content, new courses. What is your like best tip for marketing to help people kind of like, for example, if they are first time book writers, how was the best kind of like way to market your book?
Ooh, it's so funny that you asked that because I actually have a workbook that I sell on my website.
Oh,
And what I
wow.
can do for you, yeah, what I can do for you is I'll make a promo code for your listeners if they want to download it, and I'll
That's
send that to you. And then you can put it in the show notes if you want to do that.
that's
But
amazing.
um,
Before.
yeah, I made that workbook for myself because I wanted to have the notes because there was so much that I had to learn, even with my background in marketing as an executive for, billion-dollar brands. Um, Publishing a book is something I'd never done before. And I'm a marketing expert, right? So my publisher and I would kind of go head to head because I would say, well, that's not going to work for the analytics, and you know, because it's almost like you know too much. It's like if you're a teacher and you have a child in school, you're probably that teacher's most annoying parent because you know enough to be dangerous, but then not know when to chill out. So
Yeah.
I approached my book with the same strategic methodology that I do for my clients, for my business, and everything else that I do. Why would I treat my book any differently than I've treated all these hundreds of other clients, brands, companies that I work for? Of course, I'm going to give it the same approach. So I built out a business plan for my book on the marketing front. And then people kept asking me this exact question. So I will happily do that. I will say there's a lot to it. If writing a book was easy, everyone would do it. Only 2% of the population does it. And that's including like PhD students, which make up about half that population. So most people say, it's over 90% of people report that they want to write a book, but then only 2% actually do it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, there's a big gap. And I think the biggest thing is people focus so much on the writing that they forget how important the marketing and publishing and editing parts are. And so if you are, approaching a book, it's really looking at what are you willing to invest? Are you willing to go on podcasts like this amazing podcast and talk about your book and share your story with people? If you're not willing to talk about your story, then why would anyone be willing to read your story, right?
Wow.
And then realizing that when it comes to marketing your book, it is one person's job. I don't care who you are. You could be Prince Harry, you could be, Viola Davis, whoever you are. The number one person who's going to promote your book and say the most about your book is going to be you. You're the reason why people want to read your words. And so understanding that until you sell those first, we'll say 10,000 copies, it's not going to be other people doing it for you. And so understanding that means visiting bookstores, talking to people, shaking hands, networking, doing the television shows, doing the radio shows. Like the marketing is going to be you doing the heavy lifting, even if you get an amazing deal with a top 5 publisher. It's going to be you. And so what I would encourage people to do before they even start writing their book is get real honest and have that reality check of what am I willing to invest? Because on top of the time, you will invest money. Again, unless you're Prince Harry and you have a multi-million-dollar book deal, right? Right? But other than that, like you're going to be investing in your own Amazon ads, or you're going to be running your own Meta ads, your own Instagram ads. And so the question is, are you going to effectively like invest, or is your thought that a book will sit with all the millions of other books that are on Amazon and just sell itself? Because I can tell you right now, books do not sell themselves. You are going to have to invest into advertising. And so if that is off-putting to you, the question is, do you want a book that you wrote but then doesn't sell to anybody, or do you want to take the time to really analyze and beef up, like, what am I willing to invest? And so my workbook Not everything that I put in my workbook, I personally haven't invested in all of that, but I indicate that, like, I did do this, I didn't do this was too expensive. And I update it as I have more changes with my book, but ultimately, yeah, my intention is to give that reality check of, here's what it takes, let's get started.
I love that. That's great. That's great advice, because I feel like it makes you even more afraid, and then through that afraidness, you just have to go because it's like, yes, writing a book is challenging, and it puts you on such like a microscope, under a microscope, and it's like that's just the first step. It's like, so true. Yes, marketing is it's such a kind of like investment, like you mentioned. It's so true. I love that. And when it comes to success, since we're closing out this podcast, and I feel like it was such a beautiful conversation, and I feel like our listeners will really have so much to learn from us, so much to kind of like pick up on with your beautiful story and your beautiful journey and conversation. How would you define success now, and has it changed?
I am so very fortunate and blessed and grateful that my parents, for various reasons, gave me a really great foundation and really told me from a younger age what really mattered. Like I mentioned, I grew up around a lot of financially successful people. But because I got to visit their homes and do sleepovers and hear about their parent dramas and affairs and extra families and all of these things that can happen to anybody, I learned really quickly that success is not about the money you make. And I'm so grateful that I always had that in my back pocket. Um, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, success is knowing that you change the world for the better. That could be making a child smile, that could be picking up your trash, but to know that you have made the world better, that someone's life was made better because you were in it, that is the definition of success. And so the more people whose lives you are making better, the more people you are serving, the more people you are helping, the more people you are empowering, that is how you are more successful. Elon Musk, yes, he's a billionaire. But where he's successful is that he's employed thousands of Americans. Millions of Americans have this affordable electric vehicle that's a luxury vehicle because he created an affordable electric vehicle that was sleek and beautiful. He has helped a lot of people. That's what makes him successful. That's what people would talk about at his funeral, not the fact that he brought a bunch of money home. And so I think if we can try to remember that success really is about serving others and making our neighborhoods better, our families better, our neighborhoods better, our communities better, and the world better, we can all be successful together.
Wow, I love it so much. What a beautiful closing, and a reminder to reconnect that spiritual aspect, because at the end of the day, yes, it's that all we want to be all rounded, and we also want to connect with the deeper meaning beyond the finance. So it's such a beautiful message. And where can people connect with you and see your amazing content?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm really easy to find. Ella Parlor, I believe there's only one on the planet. So if you just Google Ella Parlor, you can find me in all the ways. But my website is ellaparlor.com. I have all my, different social media, my email, all the ways that you can contact me and reach me. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, sometimes TikTok. I also have my podcast that you mentioned, Eavesdrop with Ella, where I get to talk to successful people just like you and how they built their success. And again, what does success actually mean beyond this financial pursuit that we focused on for so long?
I'm sure our listeners will be so inspired to start publishing and marketing their books and content. And hopefully they're also going to feel more balanced in their everyday lives. So they can also be happy and spiritually fulfilled.